Sheep could be a really easy addition for many homesteaders. Sheep have this reputation of being the triple threat of meat, of fiber, of dairy. Many have said that chickens are kind of like the gateway animal or the gateway drug to homesteading, but for us, our gateway animal was a trio of Dorper sheep. So today I want to talk about the sheep that really do the best on a homestead level. I've poured hours into this research, but most importantly, I've talked to a lot of homesteaders that raise sheep. So if you are thinking about ever adding sheep to your homestead, even if it's one day down the line, this is a video you're going to want to pay attention to. Okay, so first off, before I just dive into the list, I imagine most people are interested in sheep for meat. However, I will not neglect fiber or dairy needs either. So I mentioned this earlier, sheep are known for being the triple threat, meat, fiber, and dairy, but there's really no sheep that does all of them exceptionally. You kind of have to choose one, maybe two, and double down on those. Although if you want a sheep that does all three, I do have a few options for you. It's just that their superpower isn't one of those three. They just do all three kind of well. And that's the point before I jump into this. Each sheep has their advantages for the setting. And the setting could be your location, your time, the amount of land that you have. There's a lot of things, I'll go over them today, but there's no perfect sheep. There's no magic sheep. That'd be cool though. Magic sheep doesn't exist. So the first sheep is the black belly sheep. So sometimes called the Barbados black belly. There is also an American variety of it. The true breed does come from Barbados. And so the Barbados variety has no horns, and the American variety does have horns. That's such an American thing to do. We take something cool, add a little something to it, and call it our own. The black belly is renowned for being parasite resistant. I mean, they come from an island in the Caribbean, so it makes sense why they'd be parasite resistant. If you're in a humid area, they're a great sheep. They're also a hair sheep, which has its advantages. So these are primarily a meat sheep, although their carcass size is a little bit smaller than some bigger sheeps. But even though they're hair sheep, I've been told that they do breed more in season than a typical hair sheep. This is useful if you have small acreage and you don't want to deal with separating your stud ram from your ewes most of the year, as you would have to with another hair sheep like a Katahdin or a Dorper. So the only two knocks I give these are that, one, they are possibly hard to find, and two, their meat size is maybe not as big. So if meat's your primary thing and you don't care, hell or high water, you just want the biggest sheep, Barbados isn't for you. The second breed that I chose to talk about is the Katahdin. That is what we have right now. We have 5 young Katahdin rams that we're finishing out this year. My favorite thing about the Katahdins is they are very easy to find. I'd say they're probably the most common hair sheep that I see, especially in my farmer's market. I say, what do you raise? If they're selling lamb, it's almost always Katahdin or a Katahdin mix. So Katahdins also are known for their parasite resistance, and that's been true for me. We're having a very hot and humid summer, and I've had no issues. But it's not a breed-wide standard. So I talked about they're easy to find, and it's easy to find a lot of mutts or crossbreeds of Katahdins, but because of that, you can't just always take somebody's word of like, hey, it's a Katahdin, so therefore it has amazing parasite resistance. That's not always going to be true with this breed. But there are a lot of programs that are specific. They cost quite a bit more, but you can buy a sire, a Katahdin ram that has an amazing bloodline of parasite resistance, work that into your group. But this video is for homesteaders, so maybe that doesn't make sense. So really know the people you're buying sheep from. So I think Katahdin is probably the ultimate homesteading sheep if your only concern is meat. And the reason being is, 1, they're easy to find. 2, they have renowned parasite resistance, or at least should. And 3, their carcass yield is very big. But you know who has a bigger carcass yield? And that is number 3, the Dorper. Some people might disagree with me on this, but from my Dorper that I was raising versus any other hanging weight that I've met, even people that raise Katahdins, the Dorper has a heavier hanging weight. That's been my experience and the experience of people close to me. Now, if you look at it online, a lot of people do tout its parasite resistance. I found that the Dorper had a weaker parasite resistance than maybe what was advertised. Now, could just be a different line or whatever. So ask questions when you're getting a Dorper. Local is always best in this kind of circumstance. But you think about their environment, so they come from South Africa. So they do really well out west, like if you're in the U.S. They do really well out west, high desert, mountainous desert type stuff. Again, they're perfect for that kind of environment, which where I started sheep was in Utah. They were a perfect fit there. I moved them to North Carolina, and they had some challenges here. One more thing I'll say about Dorpers, and again, this is my experience, the rams have been particularly aggressive. I've not have any pushover rams. There seems to a good stud Dorper is usually a little bit aggressive, especially when the ewes are around. My vet came out once and gave my sire, who I called Oscar, but she called him Little Hole. That should tell you what you need to know about Dorper rams. Let's talk about the St. Croix. I love the St. Croix. I don't have St. Croix, but it's another great breed I have my eye on. And so Dorper, big, beefy sheep, maybe not as parasite resistant. The St. Croix is the antithesis of that. It is a daintier hair sheep, but it is renowned parasite resistance. A lot of people who watch my channel have probably seen Greg Judy on YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel. I do watch him quite a bit. I don't agree with every word that he says, mostly because he's a bigger producer. Things are different on a homestead and a small farm. But St. Croix are still a great choice if you're small farm homestead level. Like I said, they're docile, easy to train, they'll respect a fence. They just seem like really great sheep if you're just looking for an easygoing sheep. Okay, let's take a step away from just strictly meat sheep for a second, and let's talk about the Frisian or the East Frisian. So this is for my dairy people. So the Frisians or East Frisians are great milkers. They're kind of the renowned milkers. They're docile. You find that with any dairy variety, whether it's cow or sheep. I've heard that they make excellent mothers, and they twin or even triplet more frequently than other sheep. The downside is that they are a little bit smaller sheep. If you don't want to milk a cow, I've heard of people, and people have reached out to me that have Frisians. They're a great homestead animal because you get milk every day, a manageable amount for a family, and you're going to still have to, keep a ram and have babies around, but they're not going to be these giant sheep. So it's a much more manageable food situation, meat situation for a family. Really good homestead choice. The only downside is I haven't seen any Frisians near me ever. They're probably more apt to northern climates. Again, Frisian, they come from a region in Germany, so they probably do a little bit better in the cold, which in North Carolina, we don't have a lot of cold days. Okay, speaking of animals in the cold, let's talk about the Icelandic. This is maybe the closest to the triple threat sheep, the one that I teased at the beginning. You can milk it, you can get fiber from it, and you can get meat from it. Now, from what I've heard, it doesn't give as much milk as the Frisian, and its meat is not as big, its carcass size is not as big as a meat variety like a Dorper or a Katahdin. And the wool, I've heard it's good enough to spin. So it's usable, but not as renowned as like a Merino, for example. So, the Icelandic could be a good fit. Okay, the Painted Desert. I almost did not include the Painted Desert on this list because, again, it's hard to find, and I feel like I keep saying that. But the Painted Desert's origins are so cool that I couldn't not talk about the Painted Desert on this. So the Painted Desert was originally bred for a game operation. So they were bred to be big sheep with really cool horns and really cool coloring. And so for a homesteader, that could be attractive just to have some sheep that look and feel a little bit different. If your flock is only going to be, 4 or 5, 6 animals, it'd be cool to have them all be different colors. Another nice thing about it is, if you could probably guess this, but the fact is that they were bred to be really resilient. Set it and forget it sheep. They would just be turned out on game land. And so they take care of themselves really well. Decent parasite resistance, and they grow really big without any real input besides grass and greens. And I've heard they size out pretty well. So if you're a homesteader, you can get yourself a Painted Desert. And a lot of these Painted Deserts are mutts, kind of with a Katahdin or whatever. I say go for it. Painted Deserts are a really cool sheep. Before I get to my last breed of sheep, I do have some honorable mentions. This list could have been very long. The Jacobs. Really cool sheep, renowned for their horns. They have those 4-pronged horns that look really, really cool. The Churro is another sheep, really good in like a high desert situation, Arizona, New Mexico, if you're in the States. And you can do wool with them. Let's talk about the old wool varieties. So that's like a Hampshire, a Suffolk, a Rambouillet, if I'm saying that right. Colombian is another one. Just a note on these old wool varieties. For a homestead level, they might not be great just because those sheep really do well in like a large community, so I've been told. Like they need a lot of buddies. Maybe that's bogus, but when I see those operations, they are really big. Same with, merino sheep. No one has like 8 merino sheep. They have like 200 merino sheep. But you can obviously spin wool from them and get meat from them. The Tunis is another great sheep. Again, not very common, but really good, kind of like a high desert sheep. A wool variety, really hardy sheep. Romanovs, those are really attractive sheep. Another good like meaty wool sheep. They seem to do well in northern climates. And Royal Whites. This is a Dorper and St. Croix cross. I mean, there'd be no reason to pass up a Royal White. They're an amazing sheep, just not super common yet. What's the last one? What did I save to the last? And it is the cross. The mutt, the little bit of this and a little bit of that sheep. I believe homesteaders need to get used to the idea of not being a slave to that papered animal game. I know it's tempting to say, well, if I got papered animals and, you know, I could make money back, and, you know, if people are buying papered animals for this much, I could be and like, you can make some money back for sure. However, just because an animal has papers does not make it an A+ animal. There still needs to be culling that goes into place. And if you're on a homestead level, culling is really hard financially and emotionally to do. If you only have 6 ewes and you need to cut 2 of them because you have to deworm them more often, that's a third of your crop. Also, that's a third of those animals that are your livestock and your pets. As you're a homesteader, you kind of have this, you know, different relationship with your animals than a large producer does. So I like these crosses for a reason, because crosses are generally pretty darn resilient. Okay, there's a scientific term for it. It's called hybrid vigor, and that idea is you take 2 full-blood animals, you cross them together, they usually take on the best of both of their parents. Also, with crosses, this has nothing to do with the final product, but they usually just come out looking a little bit different, and I like that. I think on a homestead level, again, if you've only got 5, 6, 7, 8 sheep, it'd be nice if they all looked a little bit different. And they're easy to find, and they're cheap. If you're a homesteader, the goal of homesteading is to produce food for your family. So you don't need this amazing expensive sheep to do that. Just find a cheap sheep. You might not get an extra 4 or 5 pounds between those sheep, but I don't think that's worth, you know, an extra couple $100 per sheep on your initial purchase. So what do you do with this information? Go get sheep. I've got lots of videos on this channel that go from anywhere of how to do sheep in your backyard, to how to do sheep on 1 acre, to how to do sheep with a few acres. There's a lot of different options, but sheep are a rewarding animal. They're really fun to raise. I sold all my sheep a year ago, thinking that I would take a break for a few years, and I bought new sheep much sooner than I thought I would, and haven't looked back. I'm a sheep person, and probably always will be. Thanks for watching today's video. This is the High Mountain Homestead, where we do regenerative agriculture on a small scale. If you liked this video, like it, subscribe to it so I can see you the next time I'm talking about sheep. I'm PJ with the High Mountain Homestead. I'll see you on the next one.